disappearance and tragic death of Kara Nichols in Colorado Springs shocked her community and left a lasting impact on her family. This story delves into the years-long search for Kara, the trial of her killer, and the legacy of advocacy and resilience her family has built in her memory.
On October 9, 2012, Kara Nichols, a vibrant 19-year-old aspiring model, vanished without a trace from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Her disappearance marked the beginning of a decade-long nightmare for her family, who tirelessly advocated for answers. Described as magnetic and full of potential, Kara had dreams of pursuing a career in modeling, makeup artistry, or cosmetology, but her life was tragically cut short. Kara's parents, Julia and Paul Nichols, reported her missing after she failed to return home. They feared the worst but clung to hope that their daughter might one day walk through their door. This emotional torment continued for nearly a decade until February 2022, when Kara's remains were discovered buried on a property in El Paso County. The grave, disturbingly, was located atop a horse burial site. The property belonged to the parents of Joel Hollendorfer, a man with a troubling history. Evidence quickly connected Hollendorfer to Kara's death. He was charged with second-degree murder after his ex-wife, Christina Palmer, revealed that he had confessed to accidentally killing Kara years earlier. She claimed that his parents were also aware of the crime, but took no action. Hollendorfer's history further deepened the tragedy. Despite prior convictions for harassment and protection order violations, these could not be used against him in court. This omission left Kara's parents frustrated and questioning the justice system's ability to protect vulnerable individuals. During the trial, Hollendorfer's defense claimed that Kara's death resulted from an accident during an encounter involving drug use and asphyxiation. This argument painted an unflattering picture of Kara, portraying her struggles with mental health and addiction as central to the incident. Her parents were devastated by this narrative, describing it as dehumanizing and deeply painful. The discovery of Kara's remains brought some closure to her family, but opened wounds anew. Her father, Paul, recounted the moment they were told about their daughter's shallow grave. It smacked hard. "We spent 10 years fearing the worst but hoping for the best." The emotional toll of Kara's case was compounded by a justice system that her parents felt undervalued her life. They hoped for a murder conviction and a life sentence for Hollendorfer, but the jury ultimately convicted him of manslaughter. The sentence of 24 years in prison felt like a hollow victory. Throughout the years of uncertainty, Julia and Paul worked tirelessly with organizations like the National Women's Coalition Against Violence and Exploitation, NWCAV, to keep Kara's case in the public eye. Their persistence ensured that Kara's story would not be forgotten, even as they fought against a system that seemed indifferent. Kara's tragic death underscored the importance of advocating for missing persons and vulnerable individuals. Her story continues to inspire efforts to address systemic issues and prevent similar tragedies in the future. In June 2023, over a decade after Kara Nichols vanished, her killer, Joel Hollendorfer, stood trial. The proceedings were fraught with emotional testimonies, conflicting narratives, and a spotlight on systemic failures. For Kara's parents, the trial was a painful reminder of their daughter's life and the injustice surrounding her death. Hollendorfer's ex-wife, Christina Palmer, provided pivotal testimony. She recounted his 2014 confession, where he admitted to accidentally killing Kara during an encounter. Her testimony revealed that Hollendorfer's parents knew about the crime, but chose silence over accountability. Despite these revelations, no charges were brought against them. The defense's portrayal of Kara during the trial deeply upset her family. Her struggles with mental health and addiction were used to diminish her character, framing her as an unworthy victim. Paul Nichols described the experience as heartbreaking, saying, "Imagine being her parents in that situation. It was awful." Prosecutors sought justice, highlighting Hollendorfer's past convictions and the gruesome circumstances of Kara's death. However, the jury could not convict him of second-degree murder, instead finding him guilty of manslaughter. This verdict, coupled with a 24-year sentence, left Kara's family feeling betrayed by the justice system. Julia Nichols expressed her disappointment. What they said with that verdict was that our daughter's life didn't matter at all. The Nichols family's grief was compounded by the perception that the trial had failed to honor Kara's life and potential. Despite their pain, the Nichols family remained steadfast in their advocacy. They worked to ensure that Kara's story would serve as a cautionary tale and a call to action. Collaborating with organizations like NWCAVE, they raised awareness about the importance of media exposure for missing persons. Michelle Bart, president of NWCAV, emphasized the significance of their efforts. If it wasn't for their persistence and media coverage, Kara's case might have fallen through the cracks. The Nichols family's determination ensured that Kara's life and story would not be reduced to a salacious headline. In remembering Kara, her parents highlighted her vibrant personality and dreams. Julia described her as the center of our family, while Paul spoke of her ability to light up a room. Kara's aspirations, whether in modeling or cosmetology, were a testament to her creativity and resilience. Kara's legacy extends beyond her tragic death. Her family's fight for justice has sparked conversations about the treatment of victims and the need for systemic change. They continue to advocate for missing persons, ensuring that other families do not endure the same heartbreak. The sentencing of Joel Hollendorfer marked the end of a long chapter in the Nichols family's journey, but left many questions unanswered. Their resolve to honor Kara's memory and push for change remains unwavering.
Today, we're diving into a case that's incredibly sad and really complicated. It's the disappearance and death of Kara Nichols.
Oh, yeah, this one is really hard.
Yeah, it's a rough one.
It really is.
I may have heard about it. This case was all over the news for almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Kara was this 19-year-old aspiring model, and she was from Colorado Springs, just full of life, full of dreams,
Yeah.
But then, on October 9th, 2012, she just disappeared. No trace.
Gone.
Yeah, gone.
It's just like that.
And her parents,
Yeah.
Julia and Paul, they had lived through just an absolute nightmare.
Can you imagine, right? Like just 10 years of searching, hoping, fearing the worst, but never giving up.
No, I can't even begin to imagine. And, the sources we've gathered for this deep dive, they really show the emotional toll of all those years,
Yeah.
There's this one quote from Julia where she talks about just living with this hole in your heart, this constant ache that never goes away.
Yeah.
And they never stopped looking for Kara. But in February of 2022, the mystery took a really tragic turn.
That's when they found her remains, right? Buried on this property that was being used as a horse burial site.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is the property was owned by, get this, Joel Hollendorfer's parents. And he's the man who ended up being charged with her death.
Wow. Okay, so that's pretty incriminating right there.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about Joel Hollendorfer for a minute. Like, what was the evidence? What made the investigators zero in on him?
Well, there were a few things. Obviously, the location of Kara's remains on his parents' property, that's a huge red flag right there.
Yeah, that's not a good look.
No, not at all. And then there was some digital evidence, too, like cell phone records, things like that put Kara near the property on the night she disappeared. But the most damning piece of evidence, that came from a totally unexpected source.
Okay, so we've got the location, we've got some cell phone records, that's already kind of bad. But who was this unexpected source?
His ex-wife, Christina Palmer, she came forward and said that back in 2014, Hollendorfer confessed to her. He told her he killed Kara.
What? He just came out and admitted it?
He said it was an accident.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, said it happened during some kind of drug-fueled thing that went wrong, and he panicked and buried her.
So he told her all that back in 2014?
Yeah. That was like 2 years after Kara disappeared.
Wow. So, with a confession like that, that must have been a major break in the case. What happened after Christina Palmer told the police?
Well, that confession, along with all the other evidence, that was enough for them to arrest him and charge him. They got him with second-degree murder.
Okay.
But then, remember we were talking about his past criminal record?
Yeah, the harassment and protection order violations.
Right. So you'd think, okay, this guy has a history of violence. This is going to be a slam dunk, right? But legally, the prosecution, they couldn't use any of that against him in the trial.
Wait, why not? That seems like pretty important information. Especially if they're trying to prove he was capable of hurting Kara?
Yeah, it does seem like it should be relevant, right? But it all boils down to this legal thing. They call it prejudicial value versus probative value.
So I'm guessing those are legal terms?
Yeah. Basically, what it means is that even though those past offenses might seem like they matter here, they could also unfairly bias the jury against him,
Oh, so they could convict him based on his past and
Yeah.
not the actual evidence in this case.
Exactly. And the court, they have to balance that potential bias against how much those past offenses actually prove he did at this time. And in this case, the judge said, nope, the risk of bias, it's too high. So they couldn't use it.
So because those other offenses weren't directly tied to Kara's disappearance, the judge said they were inadmissible.
Exactly. And let me tell you, Kara's parents, they were furious. They felt like the system was letting Hollendorfer get away with something. They kept saying, look, this guy, he's got a history. This makes him more likely to have done something to Kara.
Right, kind of establishes a pattern.
Exactly. But the court didn't see it that way. So the trial went on without that information.
Okay, so no past convictions allowed.
Yeah.
How did the prosecution build their case then?
Well, They really leaned hard on the physical evidence, the cell phone records putting Kara at the scene, and, of course, Christina Palmer's testimony. That was huge. They argued that everything Hollendorfer did, especially burying the body, it all pointed to him trying to cover up a crime.
It sounds like a solid case.
Yeah.
But if he confessed, why was there even a trial? Didn't he try to plead guilty to a lesser charge or something?
He did confess to burying the body, yeah. But here's where it gets even more complicated and honestly kind of messed up for Kara's family. See, Hollendorfer's lawyers, they claimed that Kara's death, it was an accident.
An accident. How do they explain that?
They said it was a drug-fueled encounter gone wrong, that it led to accidental asphyxiation.
Oh, so they're saying it wasn't intentional.
Right, and they brought up Kara's struggles with mental health and addiction, implying that her own choices led to her death.
Ooh, that's not right. It's like they're trying to blame the victim. It's awful to listen to, especially for her family.
Oh, it was terrible for them. They were devastated.
I bet. So with these two completely different stories, what did the jury end up deciding?
Well, the jury, they did find him guilty, but not of murder.
Oh, so what did they find him guilty of then?
Manslaughter.
Okay, so that's obviously a lesser charge.
Yeah.
So I guess the defense, their argument about it being an accident, maybe that's what swayed the jury.
Yeah, it seems like it.
So what was the sentence for manslaughter?
He got 24 years in prison.
24 years. I mean, I can only imagine how Kara's parents felt about that. I mean, after a decade of fighting for answers, for justice, and then to get a verdict like that.
It was devastating for them. They felt like the system just didn't care about Kara. Like her life didn't matter. 24 years, it just wasn't enough.
Yeah, I can understand why they would feel that way.
There's this quote from Paul, Kara's dad, that really captures their anger. He said, "This wasn't justice. This was a slap on the wrist for a man who took our daughter's life and then tried to smear her name to escape responsibility."
That's powerful. And, this whole thing, it brings up a much bigger issue. Like, how does our legal system handle these cases? Where you have two totally different stories about what happened, and it's so hard to figure out the truth, the intent, who's really to blame.
Yeah, it's incredibly complex.
And, we've talked about the years of uncertainty, the pain of finding out what happened to Kara, but there's another layer of trauma here. I mean, having to go through the trial, hearing the defense's version of events, and then feeling like the verdict just doesn't do their daughter's life justice.
It's like they have to relive the nightmare all over again.
Exactly. So did the sources mention if Kara's parents had any support during all this? Were there any organizations that helped them through this whole ordeal?
Yeah, actually, there was this group, the National Women's Coalition Against Violence and Exploitation. They call it NWCAVE for short.
NWCAVE, okay.
Yeah, they really stepped up to help the Nichols family. They gave them counseling, helped them navigate the legal stuff, and they were really vocal in the media, making sure Kara's case stayed in the public eye.
It's amazing how much they did for them. It sounds like NWCAVE really made a difference, helping the Nichols family find their voice and making sure that Kara's story was heard.
Oh, they were crucial. Michelle Bart, the president of NWCAVE, she said this in one of the articles. Without their relentless efforts to keep Kara's story in the public eye, this case might have easily faded away. They refused to let that happen.
It's so inspiring how they wouldn't give up.
Yeah.
So besides working with NWCAV, what else have Kara's parents done to keep her story out there and advocate for change?
They've been really active talking about the need for better support for families of missing people. They've spoken at conferences, done a ton of interviews, and worked really hard to raise awareness about the systemic problems that lead to these kinds of tragedies.
It's incredible how they've turned their grief into action, pushing for real change.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
But let's shift gears a bit. We've talked a lot about the legal battles and the advocacy work, but let's talk about Kara herself. Who was she, as a person beyond this tragedy?
That's what her parents really want people to remember. They want the world to see Kara for the amazing young woman she was, not just as a victim.
Yeah.
They've shared so many stories, pictures, painting a picture of this vibrant, creative young woman with an infectious laugh.
What were some of her passions? What kind of future did she dream of?
She was really into creative stuff.
Yes.
Modeling was a big dream, yeah. But she was also really interested in makeup artistry, cosmetology, things like that. She had a real eye for beauty, and she wanted to help people feel good about themselves.
It's heartbreaking to think about everything that was taken from her, the life she could have had.
Yeah, it really is.
Do her parents talk about what they miss most about her?
Oh, all the time. They talk about her warmth, her compassion, that smile that could light up a room. Julia said, "I miss her laughter the most. It was like music to my ears."
Those little details, they really bring Kara to life. They remind us that she was a real person, a daughter, a friend, not just a name in a headline.
Absolutely. And by sharing these stories, her parents are making sure that a part of her lives on, that she's more than just a victim.
Their strength is incredible. They've gone through so much. But they found a way to honor their daughter and fight for a world where these tragedies happen less often.
Their story is both heartbreaking and inspiring. It shows how powerful resilience and the pursuit of justice can be, even when it feels impossible.
It's a powerful message. And I think it resonates with anyone who's been following this case or anyone who's experienced loss and injustice in their own lives.
And it reminds us that even in the face of terrible challenges, there's always hope. And that even small actions can make a difference in creating a better world.
It's really inspiring to see how much they've done, But their story, and so many others like it, they raise some really tough questions. Like, how can we as a society do better? How can we support families going through something as awful as this? What can we do to stop this from happening again?
Man, those are the questions, aren't they? And there are no easy answers. But one thing that really comes through in all the research is just how important awareness is.
Yeah.
These cases, they tend to fade from the headlines once the trial's over, but the families, they're still living with it, still fighting for justice.
Like you said before, if it wasn't for Kara's parents, her case might have been forgotten. Their work made sure people remembered her, that her story kept being told. And it made people think, about accountability, justice, and how to protect people who are vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where groups like NWCAVE, they really come in. They give families a way to tell their stories, to connect with others who get it, and to fight for changes that could actually prevent these tragedies from happening again. They also give practical help, too, like with legal stuff and counseling, which can be so important for families trying to deal with the aftermath of a case like this.
So, besides supporting organizations like NWCAVE, what can regular people do? It feels like such a big problem. Where do you even start?
I know it can be overwhelming, but even small things can make a difference, like learning about the signs of abuse and violence. That's huge. Knowing how to step in safely if you think someone's in danger, that can literally save a life. And there's always local stuff you can support, like prevention programs or shelters. You can volunteer, or even just being more aware of the people around you and what they might be going through.
It's a good reminder that change can happen in lots of ways, from individual choices to bigger changes in society. We all have a role to play in making the world safer and more just.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up our deep dive into Kara's case, I think the biggest thing to remember is the power of resilience and hope. Kara's parents, they've been through hell and back, but they've shown incredible strength, fighting for their daughter, keeping her memory alive, pushing for change. Their story shows us that even when things are at their darkest, there's always hope. And that fighting for justice, it matters. It can make a difference.
It's a tough story, but it's so important. And as we end here, I want to encourage you, our listeners, to think about Kara, to think about all the missing people whose stories we don't hear, and to think about how we can all work to create a safer, more just world for everyone.